A thunderous mammoth stampede shakes the 1874 Dakota prairie, chasing a wounded Comanche warrior toward death's edge. Victoria Ashford, a fearless 16-year-old armed with a rifle and a heart unbound by hate, risks everything to save him. Her single act of courage sparks a fragile hope for peace between settlers and Comanche. But will it ignite war instead? Can one girl's compassion mend a divided land? Subscribe now, share where you're listening from, and join this gripping tale. Will Victoria's bravery forge a new dawn or unravel her world? Stay to uncover a story that challenges hearts and history. Don't miss the ending. Can peace truly prevail? The Dakota sun scorched the prairie in 1874, a relentless forge casting waves of heat across an ocean of tall grass. Victoria Ashford, 16 and wiry, guided her mare, Stella, along the edge of her family's sprawling ranch. Dust clung to her braided golden hair, and her emerald eyes, sharp as a hawk's, scanned the horizon. Her father, William, had carved this land from the wild, teaching her to ride and shoot, skills no proper lady should need. But Victoria was no delicate flower. With her mother long gone and her father haunted by loss, she patrolled the boundaries, rifle slung across her back, guarding against rustlers, beasts, and the shadow of Comanche raids that hung like smoke over the frontier. The air carried the bite of sage and dry earth as she crested a low hill. A faint tremor stirred the ground, a pulse beneath her boots. She froze, reins tight in her calloused hands, as the tremor grew into a rumble, then a roar. Below, the prairie churned into chaos. A mammoth herd, 200 strong, thundered across the plain, their shaggy hides a dark tide swallowing the grass. Their tusks gleamed like scythes, and the earth groaned under their weight, dust rising in a choking haze. Victoria's pulse quickened, but it wasn't the mammoths that stopped her breath. A lone figure staggered ahead of them, a young man in torn buckskin, blood staining his side, his dark hair whipping as he stumbled. A Comanche warrior, no older than 20, running for his life. Her father's warnings clawed at her mind. Comanche were the enemy. Their raids a blade held to the throat of every settler. One had killed her uncle years ago, a wound still raw in the Ashford family's heart. Every instinct screamed to turn Stella and ride hard for the ranch. Let the prairie claim its due. But as the warrior fell, his strength ebbing, she saw not a foe, but a man, his eyes fierce with defiance, despite the blood pooling at his feet. His horse was gone, spooked into the vast nowhere, leaving him to face the stampede alone. Victoria's hands tightened on the reins, her jaw set. "Come on, Stella," she muttered, spurring the mare down the slope. The wind howled in her ears as they charged toward the chaos, the ground shaking like a drum under the mammoth's hooves. The air was thick with their musky stench, a wall of muscle and fury closing in. Victoria leaned low, her braid snapping like a whip, her heart a war drum in her chest. The warrior, Kiva, she'd later learn, was slowing, his wounded leg dragging as the herd's outermost beasts bore down. She yanked her rifle free, firing 2 shots into the sky. The cracks split the air, sharp as lightning, but the mammoths didn't flinch, driven by a primal rage nothing could turn. She cursed, shoving the rifle back into its scabbard. No time for plans, only action. Stella's hooves pounded the earth, weaving through the haze of dust. Kiva was close now, his face etched with pain, dark eyes flashing with a will to survive. "Jump!" Victoria shouted, her voice nearly swallowed by the herd's roar. She stretched out her arm, praying he'd understand. Their eyes locked for a fleeting second, his weary, hers resolute. He lunged, his calloused hand seizing her wrist as she clamped onto his forearm. The force nearly tore her from the saddle, her muscles screaming as she hauled him up. His weight slammed against her back, his arms locking around her waist as Stella veered sharply, dodging a mammoth's swinging tusk. The herd was a living wall, their wild eyes rolling as they surged past, close enough to feel their heat. Victoria's breath came in ragged gasps, her hand steady on the reins as she guided Stella along the stampede's edge. A stray bull charged, its massive head low, but she jerked the mare aside, its flank brushing the beast's hide. Kiva's grip tightened, his ragged breathing hot against her neck. For endless minutes, they rode the knife's edge of survival, the world reduced to dust, thunder, and the pounding of hooves. At last, the herd's rumble faded, a distant growl as the final mammoths passed. Victoria slowed Stella to a walk, the mare's sides heaving, foam flecking her muzzle. Dust coated her throat, her pulse still racing as she turned to Kiva. He was alive, his face streaked with sweat and blood, his chest rising heavily. Their eyes met, gratitude flickering in his wary gaze. "Kiva," he rasped, his English rough. "My name. Kiva. You save me." Victoria dismounted, helping him down. His leg was gashed, blood soaking his buckskin, but he stood with a warrior's pride. "Victoria," she said, pointing to herself. She offered her hand, a gesture that felt strange in this fragile truce. He took it, his grip firm despite his wounds. Hoofbeats broke the stillness, distant, but closing fast. Victoria's stomach knotted as a dust cloud rose on the horizon. Comanche riders, likely searching for their lost warrior. Kiva's eyes followed hers, his voice urgent as he spoke in his tongue, gesturing toward the riders. She didn't understand the words, but his tone was clear. Trouble was coming. Her hand rested on her rifle, not drawing it. She'd saved a life, but the prairie was a harsh judge, and the cost of her choice was riding toward them. The prairie's dust settled, but the weight of Victoria's choice hung heavy as she stood beside Kiva, the wounded Comanche warrior in the fading echo of the mammoth stampede. His hand, still gripping hers, was a tether to a decision that could unravel her world. The distant hoofbeats grew louder, a war party's shadow creeping across the Dakota plain in 1874, their silhouettes sharp against the blood-red sunset. Victoria's heart thudded like a war drum, but she held her ground, rifle at her side, as Kiva's urgent words in his native tongue faded into the wind. She'd saved a life, but the cost was riding toward them, and the prairie was no place for regrets. Kiva's dark eyes, sharp despite his pain, scanned the horizon. His leg, gashed and blood-soaked, trembled as he leaned against her, but his voice was steady. "My people come," he said, his English halting but clear. "Not to fight, to find me." Victoria nodded, her throat dry as the sage-scented air. She helped him limp toward a cluster of boulders, their jagged forms offering scant cover. Stella snorted, her ears twitching as the hoofbeats thundered closer, a dozen Comanche riders emerging from the dust. Their faces, painted with streaks of ochre, were taut with suspicion, lances gleaming in the dying light. Victoria's fingers brushed her rifle, but she kept it slung. Drawing now would be a spark to dry grass. The lead rider, a broad-shouldered man with a single eagle feather, raised a hand, halting the group. His gaze locked on Kiva, then flicked to Victoria, assessing her like a hawk sizing up prey. Kiva spoke rapidly, his voice a low growl, gesturing to her with respect. She caught his name for her, Victoria, and the word for courage, sharp and reverent. The rider dismounted, his moccasins silent on the grass, and approached. His presence was a storm held in check, his eyes deep as canyon shadows. Kiva translated, his breath labored. "This, my uncle, Tarak. He thanks you." But he fears for me. For you. Victoria straightened, her boots crunching on the dry earth. Tell him I saved you because it was right, she said, her voice steady as iron. No debt, no fight. Kiva relayed her words, and Tarek's gaze softened, though his warrior's hands stayed near their weapons. He spoke, his voice like gravel under hooves, and Kiva translated. Tarak says you are brave, but your people and mine, blood between us. You risk much. Victoria's mind flashed to her uncle's death, a Comanche blade in the night, a wound her father still carried. Yet, as she looked at Kiva, alive despite the odds, she felt no regret. Tarak gestured to the east, where the Ashford ranch lay, its oil lamps faint stars against the twilight. We must go there, Kiva said, wincing as he shifted his weight. My grandfather, Chief Tashaska, must know. He will decide. Victoria's stomach knotted. Bringing a Comanche to her father's doorstep was a gamble that could brand her a traitor. But leaving Kiva here, wounded and exposed, was no choice at all. Then we ride, she said, helping him toward Stella. His weight sagged against her, his pride battling his pain as she hoisted him onto the mare's back. The ride to the ranch was a tense dance with the darkening plain. The Comanche warriors followed at a distance, their horses' hooves a steady drum roll, their silence louder than any war cry. Victoria kept Stella at a careful pace, Kiva's arms tight around her waist, his breath ragged but unyielding. The prairie stretched vast and unforgiving, its grasses whispering secrets of blood and survival. As the ranch's silhouette loomed, William Ashford stepped onto the porch, his lean frame taut, his pale blue eyes narrowing at the sight of Kiva. Victoria, he said, his voice low, edged with worry. What in God's name have you done? She dismounted, steadying Kiva as he slid down, his face pale but his posture defiant. Papa, this is Kiva, she said, meeting her father's gaze. I pulled him from a mammoth stampede. He's hurt, and his people are coming. At dawn, to talk. William's jaw tightened, the ghost of his brother's death flashing in his eyes. A Comanche? Here? He said, his voice a low growl. After what they took from us? Victoria stepped closer, her voice firm. He's not the one who killed Uncle James. He's a man, Papa, and he's bleeding. We don't turn away the wounded. William's silence was heavier than the prairie night, his hand hovering near the pistol at his hip. Behind them, Tarak and his warriors watched from the shadows, their presence a coiled spring. Kiva spoke, his voice rough but clear. My grandfather seeks peace. Your daughter. She makes it possible. William's eyes flicked to Kiva, then back to Victoria, the weight of her choice settling like dust. Finally, he nodded, stepping aside. Get him inside, he said. We'll face the consequences come morning. Victoria led Kiva into the ranch house, his limp heavy, but his head high. The oil lamps cast long shadows across the plank floor, their flicker mirroring the fragile truce she'd sparked. As she bandaged his wound, the question gnawed. Had she saved a man only to invite war to her doorstep? The prairie outside was silent, but the dawn would bring Chief Tashaska, and with him, a reckoning that could either mend or break the land she called home. The prairie outside was silent, but the dawn loomed like a loaded rifle, its promise of Chief Tashaska's arrival heavy with hope and dread. Inside the Ashford ranch house, Victoria knelt beside Kiva, wrapping his wounded leg in clean linen, her hands steady despite the storm brewing in her chest. The oil lamps cast flickering shadows across the plank walls, their glow a frail defense against the darkness of 1874 Dakota. Kiva's eyes, dark and watchful, followed her movements, his gratitude unspoken but clear. As she tied off the bandage, the creak of the porch under her father's boots echoed, a warning that the past was not done with them yet. William stood in the doorway, his weathered face carved with worry, his pale blue eyes fixed on Kiva. The air was thick with the scent of lamp oil and the faint tang of blood. "Victoria," he said, his voice low, like the growl of a distant storm. "You've brought a Comanche into our home. You know what they took from us." The ghost of his brother, James, hung between them, a wound cut deep by a Comanche raid years ago. Victoria rose, wiping her hands on her trousers, her gaze unflinching. "I know, Papa. But Kiva's not the one who took him. He's hurt. And his people are coming to talk, not fight. We can't let old blood blind us." William's jaw tightened, his hand resting on the doorframe as if to anchor himself. "Talk?" he said, his voice sharp as a blade. "You think words can erase what's been done? The settlers won't see it your way. Marcus Crawford's already out there, stirring up trouble." Victoria's stomach knotted at the name. Marcus, the militia leader, carried a hatred for the Comanche as fierce as a prairie fire, his family's graves fueling his rage. Word of her saving Kiva would spread like dust on the wind, and Marcus wouldn't wait for Dawn to act. Kiva shifted on the pallet, wincing as he sat up. "Your father speaks truth," he said, his English rough but deliberate. "My people want peace, but trust is hard. You're Marcus. He hunts us like wolves." His voice carried a warrior's pride, tempered by pain, and Victoria saw the weight of his own losses in his eyes. She turned to William. "Papa, if we turn him out now, we're no better than Marcus. Kiva says his grandfather, Chief Tashaska, wants to end the fighting. We have to give them a chance." The ranch house creaked under the weight of the night, the wind outside rattling the shutters like a warning. William paced, his boots heavy on the floorboards, his silence a battle between duty and distrust. Victoria moved to the window, peering into the darkness. The prairie stretched vast and unyielding, its shadows hiding eyes that might already be watching. She imagined Marcus and his militia, their rifles primed, their anger a spark waiting to ignite. Her choice to save Kiva had set a wheel turning, and there was no stopping it now. Kiva spoke again, his voice low but firm. "My grandfather. He lost a son to settlers, like you lost your brother. But he believes in your daughter's courage." He gestured to Victoria, his hand steady despite his wounds. "She makes peace possible." William stopped pacing, his eyes flicking to Kiva, then to Victoria. The pain in his gaze was raw, but there was something else. Pride, maybe, or the faintest flicker of hope. "You're playing with fire, girl," he said finally, "but you've got your mother's heart. We'll see this through till dawn." A faint clatter broke the tension. Hooves, not from the Comanche, but from the south. Victoria's pulse quickened as she stepped onto the porch, William at her side. A lone rider emerged from the gloom, his horse lathered, his face half hidden by a wide-brimmed hat. It was Sarah Peterson, a widow from a neighboring ranch, her eyes sharp as flint. "Victoria Ashford," she called, reining in her horse. "Word's out you've got a Comanche in there. Marcus is rallying men, says you're a traitor." Her voice was steady, but there was no malice in it, only a warning. Victoria's hand tightened on the porch rail. "I saved a man's life, Sarah. His people are coming to talk peace. Marcus can't see past his hate." Sarah's lips thinned, but she nodded. "I lost my husband to raiders, same as Marcus. But I heard this Comanche's kin wants to parley. I'll tell the others to hold off till morning. You'd better pray you're right." She wheeled her horse and vanished into the night, leaving a trail of dust that gleamed under the stars. Inside, Victoria returned to Kiva's side, her mind racing. The ranch was a fragile island in a sea of suspicion, and dawn would bring Chief Tashaska's band and Marcus's wrath. As she stoked the fire, its embers glowing like the hope she clung to, Kiva's voice broke the silence. Your people. They fear us, but you do not. Victoria met his gaze, the weight of her choice settling deeper. I fear what happens if we don't try, she said. The night stretched on, heavy with the past, but the dawn promised a reckoning that could change the prairie forever. The night stretched on, heavy with the past, but the dawn promised a reckoning that could change the prairie forever. Victoria sat by the hearth, the fire's embers casting a faint glow across the Ashford ranch house, her rifle resting against the wall. Kiva slept fitfully on his pallet, his breathing uneven, while William kept watch at the window, his silhouette rigid against the starlit Dakota plain of 1874. Sarah Peterson's warning echoed in Victoria's mind. Marcus Crawford was coming, his militia fueled by vengeance, and the fragile hope of peace hung like a thread over a flame. As the first gray light crept across the horizon, a distant rumble stirred the silence, not of mammoths, but of hooves. Chief Tashaska's band was near. Victoria stepped onto the porch, the cool air sharp with the scent of dew and sage. Her boots crunched on the frost-kissed boards, her breath a faint cloud in the pre-dawn chill. The prairie stretched vast and unyielding, its grasses whispering secrets of blood and truce. She gripped her rifle, not to draw, but to steady her nerves, as shapes emerged from the haze. 20 Comanche warriors, their horses adorned with beads, not war paint. At their head rode a towering figure, his eagle feather headdress catching the first rays of dawn. Chief Tashaska, his presence as commanding as the land itself, raised a hand, halting his men a respectful distance from the ranch. William joined her, his face etched with the weight of years and loss. "That's him, ain't it?" he muttered, his hand hovering near his pistol. Victoria nodded, her eyes fixed on Tashaska as he dismounted, his moccasins silent on the grass. Kiva limped out, his wound bandaged, but his posture unbowed, and spoke rapidly in Comanche, gesturing to Victoria. Tashaska's gaze settled on her, deep as a canyon's shadow, assessing her courage. Kiva translated, his voice rough but clear. "Grandfather says your heart is strong. You saved his blood. He brings gifts, not war." A warrior stepped forward, laying a buffalo robe and a carved bow at Victoria's feet, their craftsmanship a testament to Comanche honor. She knelt, her fingers brushing the robe's soft fur, but her heart raced. The gifts were a gesture of trust, but the settlers would see only a trap. "Tell your grandfather I'm honored," she said, her voice steady as iron. Kiva relayed her words, and Tashaska nodded, a flicker of respect in his eyes. But the air grew taut as new hoofbeats sounded, this time from the south, sharp and urgent. Victoria's pulse quickened. Marcus Crawford's militia, 30 strong, crested the hill, their rifles glinting like fangs in the morning light. Marcus dismounted, his face a mask of fury, his voice booming across the yard. "William Ashford, you've got a Comanche in your house? After what they did to your brother?" His men fanned out, their murmurs a low growl, hands itching on triggers. Victoria stepped forward, her boots firm on the earth. "Marcus, I saved Kiva from a stampede. His grandfather's here for peace, not blood." Marcus spat into the dirt. "Peace? With savages who killed my family? This is treason, girl." William moved beside her, his presence a quiet anchor. "No one's drawing blood on my land till we hear this out," he said, his tone unyielding. Tashaska's warriors stood calm, their hands empty, but the tension was a coiled rattler, ready to strike. Victoria's mind raced. This was the moment where courage could either bridge worlds or ignite them. She thought of the stories that live beyond the prairie, tales of hope that bind us. If you're moved by this stand for peace, she said, her voice clear, addressing both sides, join us by subscribing to hear how it unfolds. Share where you're from. Let's see how far this story travels. Kiva limped forward, his voice cutting through the din. My grandfather seeks to end raids by the Iron Horse Band, our enemies, not yours. War hurts us all. His words, raw and earnest, stirred a murmur among the settlers. Marcus's hand hovered over his pistol, his eyes locked on Tashaska. You expect me to trust you? He growled. Victoria seized the moment, her voice steady. Marcus, they came without war paint. Kiva's hurt, yet he stands here. Give them 1 hour to prove their word. The militia stirred, some lowering their rifles, doubt flickering in their eyes. Tashaska spoke, his voice like gravel under hooves, and Kiva translated. Chief says a life debt binds us. He offers gifts to honor Victoria's courage. The buffalo robe gleamed in the dawn, a symbol of a fragile truce. Marcus's gaze darted between the gifts and Victoria, his hatred warring with reason. The prairie held its breath, the sun climbing higher, casting long shadows across the yard. Victoria stood between two worlds, her heart pounding, knowing the next words, or bullets, would decide the fate of this land. The prairie held its breath, the sun climbing higher, casting long shadows across the Ashford Ranch yard where Victoria stood between two worlds, her heart pounding like a war drum. The buffalo robe and carved bow at her feet gleamed in the Dakota dawn of 1874. Fragile symbols of truce, dwarfed by the menace of Marcus Crawford's militia and Chief Tashaska's warriors, their eyes locked in a standoff that could erupt into blood. Kiva's words about the Iron Horse Band, a shared enemy, hung in the air, a faint hope against the weight of years of hate. The next move would either forge a path to peace or set the plain ablaze. Victoria's boots dug into the earth, her gaze steady as she faced Marcus, his face twisted with grief and fury. 1 hour, Marcus, she repeated, her voice cutting through the tense murmurs of his men. Give Tashaska a chance to speak. Marcus's hand twitched near his pistol, his eyes boring into hers. You're a fool, girl, he growled, trusting snakes who've spilled our blood. But doubt flickered in the faces of his militia. Some rifles lowered, their owners swayed by Kiva's claim of a common foe. William stood firm beside her, his presence a weathered oak against the storm. No one shoots till we hear the chief out, he said, his tone unyielding as the prairie itself. Tashaska stepped forward, his eagle feather headdress swaying in the breeze, his movements deliberate, like a wolf circling prey. He spoke, his voice deep and resonant, and Kiva, limping but resolute, translated. My grandfather offers his grandson, me, to stay here, under your watch. If Iron Horse raids, my life is yours. Proof we seek peace. The words landed like a thunderclap, silencing the yard. Victoria's breath caught. Kiva's offer was a gamble as bold as her own, a life staked on trust in a land where trust was scarce as rain. Marcus's eyes widened, his hand dropping from his weapon. You'd leave your own kin? He asked, disbelief cracking his voice. Kiva nodded, his face pale, but his gaze unflinching. I stay. If my people break faith, judge me. But know this, we bleed like you. His courage, raw as the wind-scoured plain, shifted the air. A settler in the militia, a young man with a scar across his cheek, lowered his rifle completely, muttering, Ain't no man offers his life for a lie. Others followed, their weapons dipping, the weight of Kiva's sacrifice sowing seeds of doubt. Victoria seized the moment, her voice clear. Marcus, they're not the ones who took your family. Iron Horse raids us both. We've been fighting the wrong enemy. Marcus's jaw clenched, his eyes darting between Kiva and Tashaska. The ghost of his wife's death haunted his stare, but Kiva's offer had shaken him. 1 hour, he said finally, his voice rough as gravel. We talk. But if this is a trick, I won't hesitate. Tashaska nodded, his face unreadable, but his posture regal, and gestured for his warriors to lay down more gifts: beaded moccasins, a woven blanket, each a silent plea for trust. The militia kept their distance, but the air softened, like the prairie after a storm. The groups moved to the open yard, the sun now a fierce disk above the horizon. Victoria stood at the center, her braid catching the light, translating Kiva's halting English when his words faltered. Tashaska spoke of the Iron Horse Band's raids, how they'd driven his people from sacred hunting grounds, leaving children hungry. His voice, through Kiva, carried the weight of shared loss. We fight them as you do, Kiva said. Join us, and we'll stop the killing. Marcus listened, his face a mask, but his lieutenant, Peterson, nodded slowly, whispering, maybe they ain't all the same. A settler woman, her face lined with grief, stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. My boy died in a raid last spring. You swear this Iron Horse is the enemy? Kiva met her gaze, his own pain mirroring hers. My uncle fell to their blades. I swear it. The woman's shoulders sagged, her rifle lowering, and Victoria felt a spark of hope ignite. The yard, moments ago a powder keg, now hummed with cautious words. Settlers and Comanche sharing water, their voices low but not hostile. Marcus stood apart, his eyes still hard, but his silence spoke louder than his threats. As the hour ticked by, Tashaska raised a hand, his voice firm through Kiva's translation. We share knowledge of Iron Horse. You warn us of soldiers. Together, we protect our own. Marcus hesitated, then extended his hand, a gesture foreign to the Comanche but understood. Tashaska took it, their clasp brief but heavy with meaning. The militia dispersed, their hoofbeats fading into the prairie's hum, leaving the ranch bathed in sunlight. Victoria stood on the porch, the carved bow in her hands, her heart still racing. The truce was fragile, a single spark from shattering, but it held, for now. The truce was fragile, a single spark from shattering, but it held, for now, as the Dakota sun bathed the Ashford ranch in a golden glow, the militia's hoofbeats fading into the prairie's hum. Victoria stood on the porch, the carved Comanche bow heavy in her hands, its polished wood warm against her skin. Chief Tashaska's band lingered in the yard, their horses snorting softly, while Marcus Crawford's reluctant handshake still hung in the air, a brittle promise of peace in 1874. Kiva, pale but resolute, leaned against a post, his wounded leg eased by Victoria's bandages. The prairie stretched wide, its silence a held breath, waiting for the next move to tip the scales. Victoria's eyes scanned the horizon, the grasses swaying like a restless sea. The truce was a thread, thin as spider silk, and she knew Marcus's men carried their grudges like loaded rifles. Inside the ranch house, William stoked the fire, his face etched with cautious hope. You've bought us time, girl, he said, his voice low as the wind. But time doesn't mean trust. Kiva nodded, his dark eyes meeting Victoria's. My grandfather speaks of peace, he said, his English stronger now. But words must become deeds. Iron Horse waits for no one. The yard stirred as Tashaska called his warriors to a circle, their shadows long in the morning light. Victoria joined them, her boots crunching on the dry earth, the buffalo robe draped over her shoulder like a mantle of responsibility. Tashaska's voice rolled like distant thunder, and Kiva translated, his tone steady despite his pain. Grandfather says we must share the land's secrets, where Iron Horse hunts, where soldiers march. Only together can we stop the blood? Victoria's heart quickened. The plan was bold, a pact to protect both peoples, but it demanded trust neither side had ever offered. A rustle from the south broke her thoughts. Hooves, lighter this time, not a malicious charge, but a lone rider. Sarah Peterson reappeared, her horse lathered, her face taut with urgency. Marcus is holding his men, but they're restless, she said, dismounting. Word spread to the other ranches. Folks are scared, Victoria. They want answers. Her eyes flicked to Tashaska, then to Kiva, lingering on his bandages. You swear this piece ain't a trap? Victoria stepped forward, her voice clear as a bell. Sarah, Kiva's life is on the line. He stays here as proof. We're fighting the same enemy. Iron Horse, not each other. Sarah's lips thinned, but she nodded, her gaze softening. My husband's gone, like your uncle. But I see your point, girl. I'll spread the word. Give Tashaska his chance. She turned to Kiva, her voice firm. Your people better keep their word. Kiva met her stare, his warrior's pride unbroken. We will. My life is yours if we fail. Sarah mounted her horse and rode off, her silhouette fading into the prairie's haze, carrying a message that could either calm the storm or fuel it. Tashaska gestured to a young warrior who brought forward a map of deer hide, its surface marked with charcoal lines, rivers, hills, and iron horse trails. Victoria leaned in, her braid brushing the hide, as Kiva pointed to a valley near the Black Hills. They strike here next, he said. We warn you, you warn us. William joined them, his eyes narrowing at the map. If this is true, he said, we can save lives. But if it's a lie, boy, you'll answer for it. Kiva's jaw tightened, but he nodded, his silence a vow. The day wore on, the sun climbing high, its heat pressing down like a heavy hand. Victoria and Kiva worked together, cleaning his wound and sharing stories of the land, his of sacred springs, hers of stubborn cattle drives. Each word built a fragile bridge, their voices mingling with the prairie's hum. By afternoon, a runner from Tashaska's band arrived, his horse slick with sweat, bearing news. Iron Horse had been spotted near the valley, just as Kiva had said. William sent a rider to warn a nearby outpost, his face grim but resolute. If this holds, he told Victoria, you might have changed something big. As dusk painted the sky in streaks of fire, Tashaska prepared to leave, his warriors packing their gifts, but leaving Kiva behind, a living pledge of their intent. Victoria stood with him on the porch, the air cooling, the carved bow still in her hands. You're risking everything, she said, her voice low. Kiva's eyes met hers, steady as the stars. So are you. Peace is worth it. The prairie darkened, its vastness swallowing the last of Tashaska's hoofbeats. Victoria felt the weight of the coming days, knowing the truce was a seed planted in rocky soil, its growth uncertain but possible. The prairie darkened, its vastness swallowing the last of Tashaska's hoofbeats, leaving Victoria on the porch with Kiva, the carved bow a silent testament to their shared risk. The Dakota night of 1874 closed in, its stars sharp as knives, and the truce they'd forged felt like a lone spark in a sea of dry grass. Kiva's words, peace is worth it, echoed in her mind, a fragile promise as the ranch house creaked under the weight of what lay ahead. The seed of hope had been planted, but the rocky soil of the frontier was no gentle cradle, and the dawn would test its roots. Morning broke with a chill that bit at Victoria's fingers as she saddled Stella, her breath clouding in the crisp air. Kiva, his wound stiff but healing, insisted on helping with chores, his limp slowing him, but his pride unbent. The ranch hummed with quiet purpose, William mending a fence, his eyes scanning the horizon for trouble. Word of the truce had spread, carried by Sarah Peterson's ride, and by noon, a small group of settlers arrived, their wagons creaking under the weight of supplies and suspicion. Among them was Jacob Miller, a grizzled rancher whose son had fallen to raiders. His weathered face was hard, but his voice carried curiosity. "Heard you're sheltering a Comanche, Victoria. Is that true?" She nodded, gesturing to Kiva, who stood by the barn, his hands busy with a rope. "That's Kiva. His grandfather's band warned us of an Iron Horse raid. Saved an outpost yesterday." Jacob's eyes narrowed, but he didn't reach for his rifle. "Iron Horse, you say? Not Tashaska's folk." Kiva stepped closer, his voice steady. "My people fight them, like you. They steal our horses, starve our children." Jacob grunted, his gaze softening as he studied Kiva's bandages. "Ain't seen a Comanche do chores before," he said, almost a smile. "Maybe you're onto something, girl." The day stretched long, the prairie's heat rising like a fever. Victoria rode out with Kiva to check the ranch's northern boundary, the carved bow slung across her back. The grasses whispered secrets of survival, their sway a rhythm older than hate. Kiva spoke of his band's struggles, how Iron Horse had burned their winter stores, forcing them to roam farther from sacred lands. "Your people think we're all the same," he said, his English clearer now. "But we bleed like you." Victoria nodded, her mind on her uncle's grave, the pain her father carried. "We've both lost too much," she said. "Maybe that's where we start." A dust cloud broke the horizon, not a war party but a single Comanche runner, his horse lathered from a hard ride. He carried a message from Tashaska. Iron Horse had struck a settler caravan near the Red River, but his band had driven them off, saving half the wagons. William, hearing the news, sent a rider to confirm it, his face grim but thoughtful. "If this holds," he told Victoria, "we might have allies, not enemies." The runner left a beaded charm for Victoria, a token of thanks from Tashaska's wife. She clutched it, its weight a reminder of the bridge she was building, one fragile step at a time. By evening, the ranch hosted a cautious gathering, settlers swapping stories with the runner, their voices low but not hostile. Sarah Peterson returned, her eyes less guarded. "That caravan news is true," she said. "My cousin was on it. Your Comanche saved his life." Kiva translated for the runner, who nodded, offering a woven blanket to Sarah. She hesitated, then took it, her fingers tracing its patterns. "Never thought I'd thank a Comanche," she muttered, her voice thick. Victoria's heart lifted. The seed of peace was sprouting, its roots tentative but real. As night fell, the prairie sky blazed with stars, its vastness a canvas for hope and doubt. Kiva joined Victoria on the porch, his limp easing with each day. "Your people listen now," he said, his eyes on the horizon. "But Iron Horse will test us." Victoria nodded, the beaded charm heavy in her pocket. "So will Marcus's men. But we've started something." The ranch's oil lamps glowed, a beacon in the dark, and the laughter of settler children playing in the yard mingled with the wind. The truce was young, its growth uncertain, but Victoria felt its pulse, faint but steady, in the land she called home. The truce was young, its growth uncertain, but Victoria felt its pulse, faint but steady, in the land she called home. The Dakota prairie of 1874 stretched dark and endless beyond the Ashford Ranch, its starlit vastness a silent witness to the fragile peace she'd helped forge. The beaded charm in her pocket, a gift from Tashaska's wife, weighed heavily with promise as the night gave way to a new day. Kiva stood beside her, his silhouette etched against the glowing oil lamps, his limp easing, but his resolve as firm as the carved bow hung above the fireplace. The laughter of children, settler and Comanche, faded into the wind, a sound that carried hope, but also the shadow of trials yet to come. Dawn broke with a blaze of crimson, painting the grasslands in hues of fire. Victoria rose early, her boots scuffing the porch as she scanned the horizon, the air sharp with the scent of frost and sage. The ranch hummed with life, William tending the horses, Kiva splitting wood with a careful rhythm, his wound no longer slowing him. Word of the truce had spread like wildfire, drawing curious eyes from neighboring homesteads. By mid-morning, a small caravan rolled in, Mexican traders from the south, their wagons laden with hides and spices, their voices a lively chorus in the quiet yard. Among them was Elena, a trader's wife with eyes like polished obsidian, who studied Victoria with a knowing gaze. "You're the girl who saved a Comanche," she said, her English accented but clear. "That took guts." Victoria nodded, the beaded charm warm in her hand. Didn't have a choice. Letting him die wasn't right. Elena's lips curved, not quite a smile. "Right doesn't always mean easy. Your peace talks got folks whispering from here to the Red River." She gestured to a young Comanche boy trailing her, sent by Tashaska to learn English at the ranch, a living sign of the chief's commitment. The boy, no older than 10, clutched a small bow, his eyes wide but fearless. Victoria knelt, offering him a nod. "You're welcome here," she said, her voice steady. The boy's gaze met hers, a spark of trust kindling in the morning light. The day unfolded with cautious harmony. Kiva taught the boy, named Tala, to mend a bridle, their low voices blending with the clatter of settler children playing nearby. William watched, his weathered face softening as Tola laughed, a sound rare in a land scarred by loss. But the prairie's peace was tested when a rider galloped in, dust trailing like a storm. It was Peterson, Marcus Crawford's lieutenant, his face grim. "Iron Horse hit a homestead near the Black Hills," he said, reining in his horse. 3 dead. Marcus is blaming Tashaska's band, says the truce is a lie." Victoria's heart sank, the beaded charm suddenly heavy as lead. Kiva stepped forward, his jaw tight. "Iron Horse is our enemy, too. My grandfather warned you of their trails." Peterson's eyes narrowed, but he nodded. "Your warning saved my kin last week. I believe you, but Marcus don't." Victoria's mind raced. The truce was fraying, and Marcus's anger could unravel it all. She turned to William. "We need to ride to Marcus, show him Tashaska's map, prove it's Iron Horse." William hesitated, then nodded, his voice low. "Take Kiva." His word carries weight. Kiva met her gaze, his resolve mirroring hers. "I go with you," he said, his English firm. The ride to Marcus's camp was a tense blur, the prairie's grasses whipping past as Stella's hooves pounded the earth. Kiva rode beside her, his wound barely slowing him, the deer-hide map tucked in his satchel. They found Marcus at a fortified outpost, his militia bristling with rifles, their faces hard as flint. "You dare bring him here?" Marcus growled, his hand on his pistol. Victoria held up the map, her voice cutting through the tension. "Iron Horse struck, not Tashaska. This map shows their trails. Kiva's people warned us." Kiva spoke, his tone steady. "We fight the same enemy. Let me ride with you to track them." Marcus's eyes burned, but Peterson stepped forward. "He's right, Marcus. That caravan warning saved my nephew. Give him a chance." The militia murmured, some nodding, their distrust wavering. Marcus relented, his voice rough. "One ride. If you're wrong, Comanche, you're done." The sun dipped low, casting long shadows as Victoria and Kiva joined the militia, the prairie stretching before them like a battlefield yet to be won. The truce held, its roots deepening, but the Iron Horse loomed, a storm on the horizon that could test everything they'd built. Victoria's courage on the Dakota prairie of 1874 sparked a fragile peace, proving that one act can shift a world torn by hate. Would you risk everything for a stranger, as she did? Share your thoughts. How does this tale of bravery stir you? Your reflections keep these stories alive, and we're deeply grateful for your time. Let us know where you're listening from. Let's see how far this journey travels. Join us again for more tales that challenge and inspire, where hope battles the harshest odds. Until next time, keep the fire of courage burning. Farewell from the frontier.